What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the NH Experience here, SiriusXM, also on all streaming platforms, and right here on YouTube at youtube.com/NH Experience TV. Yours truly, Nick Hamilton, in the building with a very special guest. He is currently the author of Invisible Generals, about the history of Black people in the military, primarily Benjamin O. Davis, and their journeys throughout the military and how important history is and not to be ignored. He has been between the United States and Switzerland, so he's internationally known. He is currently on a book tour promoting Invisible Generals, which you can get on Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and listen to his voice on Audible if you want to take the book with you while you're on the go. He is the one and only DOUG Melville. What's going on, Doug? How you doing, man?
Thank you. I love that intro. Internationally known. I hit my millionth mile last year flying. I said, man, I got to get off these planes.
Hey, man, let me borrow some of them miles if you don't want them. I'll take them. Hey, come on.
Every year they water them down just a little. You'd be like, oh, it's 25,000. Later it'd be like 45,000. You say 55,000. We thought inflation was bad with money. Don't even go to those airline miles.
Hey, man, they come in handy though. I will say they come in handy. I'm on my airplane miles journey, so I'm just starting out. I'm a rookie, so I'm just starting out.
I love it.
First of all, let me say thank you so much for joining the program. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here. I know you've been on an extensive book tour across the country. We saw you on Comedy Central. We see you on various other platforms promoting the book and the importance of this book, Invisible Generals, which I think everybody should get one for the house and one for the road, because it is definitely that good. I thank you and your team so much for sending me an advanced copy of the book as well, so that I can review it. I already had it on Audible, like when we first met in LA. I said, hey, man, I already got it on Audible, so I don't think I'm just trying to get some free pictures real quick. Like, I actually supported the book, and I appreciate you all for that. Before we kind of get into the elements of the book, I just want to get to know a little bit more about you as the person, as the author. What was it like growing up for you as you elevated to this point where you are right now?
It's my first book. So it was my first time writing 70,000 words. So that was, I'm kind of the first time author, but it felt natural. But I grew up in Connecticut and went to Syracuse University. I skipped 2 grades going through coming up kindergarten and third. I went to Syracuse to play football. My coach told me that I was too small because I was younger and encouraged me to be a cheerleader. I didn't even know what that was. I wanted to fight the coach. I mean, nothing is worse than if the football coach says, hey, I have a piece of advice for you. Be a cheerleader. I didn't even know what it meant, but I tried out. I was incredible at it. I used to travel around the world performing the stunts where you hold people over your head and things of that nature. And I think actually that was a turning point because cheerleading was 97% women and only 3% guys. So growing up as an alpha male and you get put in this environment, it's almost, like another planet where everyone around you is a woman and you're one of the guys. And when you say what you do, everyone thinks you're a woman, because now you'll say female CEO, because the assumption is that if you are a CEO, you're a male. So, when you would say male cheerleader, that was just like a really obscure thing. And then I spent the next 10 years when I graduated, started in the music industry. I was one of Quincy Jones' last interns at Quest Records before I graduated. And then when I got out of school, I was an assistant tour manager on the Britney Spears Hit Me One More Time tour, and then rolled that into working with different artists to help them develop their passion projects. J-Lo by Jennifer Lopez Glow and Britney Spears Fantasy and things like that. So I used to work more in the marketing side. And then I was reached out by Magic Johnson, the one and only Irvin Magic Johnson. I had a little marketing company that I had set up in the bedroom of my house. when you're first starting out and you're like, trying to be the big entrepreneur, but you have like, three people working out of the bedroom. And I get a phone call, and Irvin Magic Johnson asked me if I would be willing to work with him like I was working with others to help build out and help business development and managing investments and assets and alternative ways to leverage your name and brand. I relocate to Florida, then LA, and I head up the business development team for Magic Johnson Enterprises. And he's the one who kind of taught me about diversity, because I never really had heard the word before. And he was doing so many different projects and companies were plugging into him. And this was an opportunity for me to really understand the field. And when I left, he said, Doug, I think, maybe one day you should work in diversity. I bet you companies are going to eventually hire somebody who would like to come in and advise them on cultural relationships, culture, market segmentation. And lo and behold, a few years later in 2012, I get a phone call from an ad agency. And they say, Doug, we would like to bring you in as our first diversity officer. So this is when I started working with companies to really figure out how to make their products more inclusive. How can we make policy, whether it's visual or whether it's other ways. And that also sparked in 2012, learning about my family story after going to see the Red Tails movie. So I think one of the things was Magic Johnson really sparked in my mind the opportunity around investing in communities that have been historically overlooked. And it just so happened when I went to go see Red Tails and saw that my family's name was omitted from the movie, and I got the opportunity to work at an ad agency where they were looking for someone to help them come in. They both worked hand in hand to help me kind of better develop my journey and help make businesses easier for the next generation behind us, and have someone who's in the room that says, hey, we should double click on that. Hey, we should align here. So that led me to kind of where I am today to be an author.
No, that's an awesome. I mean, listen, most people would lose their left and right arm to be in the position to have those experiences that you were fortunate and earned to have. I want to take it back just a tad bit, if I may. You talked about working with people like Britney Spears, working with J-Lo early on, obviously, to where, we see what Britney Spears did at that time. We know what J-Lo continues to do. What did you see in those two artists that you recognize that we all see today?
Well, I think the first thing was their team saw something in me because I was only 1 year out of college. So, you do have to, what I learned, the biggest tip I learned from Quincy Jones, and I lecture at Stanford Graduate Business School in a class called Reputation Management. But the one thing he told me was, your reputation is the only thing that precedes you when you walk into a room. So 85% of every decision that directly affects you, you're not in the room to have a say, whether it's getting a mortgage approved or getting hired for a job. So I think the first thing was setting up my own reputation with different contacts before there was Instagram and everything. And then having these artist teams through their lawyers or business development people reach out to me and ask me if I wanted to join the team. Then once working with them, seeing how their teams were so important. I think, yes, working with the artist is very important and critical, but the teams that they put together, that's really where the magic happens. Do they have the best people? Do they understand the value of their brand? Can they leverage it into new P&Ls and new product lines? So that was kind of the thing. Going on tour with the Britney Spears Hit Me One More Time tour was like phase one, but then I worked with her with marketing of the Onyx Hotel tour, development of Britney Spears Fantasy. So there was different layers of the relationship. But I think what I saw in them, or what we see today, is that they were so relatable. And I think sometimes when it comes to artists, think of Snoop or think of Irvin Magic Johnson, like I said, Britney or J-Lo or even Usher with his residency. There's something that people need around relatability, that if the person is either too exposed, which is like why reality show people don't necessarily have a long runway, because you know everything about them. So it's like TMI. And then you have people that are so kind of obscure in their mannerisms or their personalities or their perceptions that they're so unrelatable that you can't really feel like your money or your product would really go to the right energy with them. So I think the real thing with the J-Lo's and the Britney Spears, you know, is their relatability factor that maybe if you looked at Christina Aguilera or 98 Degrees or LFO, you may not realize that they didn't have that staying power because everybody came up at the same time. It's actually quite interesting. We had Mandy Moore, Jessica Simpson, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, LFO, Michael Frito, Michael Bublé, 98 Degrees. You know, there was so many people that came up at the same time, but the relatability really helped with the staying power.
No, I agree. I think also too, the interesting part about it is that everybody did not want to be like the next person. I think there was some sort of not just creativity, but individuality that we don't necessarily see so much in today's climate when it comes to doing different things and being, like you said, setting yourself apart, not having too much TMI, but finding that right balance.
Yeah.
You talked about Magic Johnson. What are a couple of things that you learned from him while working with him and his company that still resonate with you today?
Magic Johnson was like, I tell people he was my PhD professor to be a businessman, but also to be a businessman of color. You know, he always wanted to ensure that all of us working for him were empowered and understood how underrepresented we were. I mean, there was around 30 of us at the time working for Magic Johnson Enterprises, and to work with, you know, 25 plus out of 30 people of color was just so rare, you know, because when you go into like a typical office environment, you don't get that kind of demographic. So his big power was number one advice from him by far was, Douglas, focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. You know, partner with your biggest weaknesses. Don't spend so much time trying to get better at them because it will take too much time. You know, he would always say, you know, when he joined the Lakers, if someone was good at shooting the ball here, he would just figure out a way to get him the ball here because you couldn't control how many hours they practiced the other shots in the gym and all these other things. If you're good right here, Nick, if this is your spot, I'm going to get you the ball right here because that's your strength. And I think sometimes we spend too much time focusing on our weaknesses and not enough time mastering our strengths. So that was the number one learning he gave me by far. The other learning he gave me that was so important was focus on the people you're with every day. So we would have a mandatory 1 hour lunch where we had no meetings, no phone calls, and he would get catering or we would do potluck and everybody would come in the office and eat lunch together because he wanted to make sure we were tight and connected and that you didn't spend your whole life going to work every day with these 30 people and you don't even really know them. And I think that's another thing we skip over crazy. You know, like you step over people to go into the office. But these were two things that he really wanted because his whole thing was team. Together, everybody achieves more. Before we were going to meetings, we'd all put our hands together on top of each other like we were going out of the locker room and be like, team, together, everybody achieves more. And that was his big thing. And I tell you, since working with him and even prior to working with him, I really don't get that team vibe from a lot of people. You know, in any level of their career, people are really selfish. But I think there's something so incredible about that energy that he would bring. And also his ability to teach young people. You know, a lot of times people that are really successful don't have patience like that. You know, they have a lot of money and a lot of success and they go, you don't know everything, you know, blah, blah, blah. But he would say, you know, do it again, make it slower, try it again. You know, that was the coaching that I needed, but also many people need to get to the next level of their career.
Oh, he's definitely magnetic. I mean, you could be around Magic Johnson for 3 to 5 minutes, and you see why he's almost like a gravitational pull. Like just the energy he exuberates just walking, and it's natural. You know, he's just that's why he's Magic, right? I mean, aside from just the basketball court, but his business ventures, like you said, what he taught you, and he gave you some bars. I'm gonna go back and take some notes on the bars that he gave you. I'm gonna try to apply those.
They still work. They're timeless. They're timeless. Yes. They are timeless.
Yes, Magic Johnson is truly a wise man for sure. You talked about going to the screening. I remember reading your book. You talked about attending a screening in Dallas, Texas, about Red Tails, and a friend of yours and personally invited you to a screening at that time, and it was like almost a director's cut, but not the actual final edit. Right. You watched the film, you saw it, you had your reservations about it, obviously, because people that should have been named in that film were not named. Obviously, Benjamin O. Davis, a few other Tuskegee Airmen that were not named in that film. You met Oprah, which people would have been like, "Oh my God, Oprah, you met her." You know, I remember you saying your mom was like freaking out, like, "Yo, that's Oprah." Like, did you get a picture? Never mind the conversation. Did you get the picture, Doug? I mean, that's what she was really on. And so many other people would have been doing the same thing. But at what point did you realize, okay, I got to write the truth. I got to write this book. Not just because it's dealing with something personal, as if my family and people that are connected with me, but the people out here, not just people in the Black community, but other communities need to really know the truth, what really took place outside of the George Lucas Red Tails movie.
Well, I think, you know, Nick, for better or for worse, we grew up on entertainment in America, our generation. I'm not saying that it's right that we look at the movie screen to get history, but it's kind of the way it works. You know, you learn about different time periods during different television shows. You know, I can't tell you how many people talk still to this day about Hidden Figures, about how we learned about NASA. You know, I mean, a lot of things we learned through cinema or through entertainment. So when the Red Tails movie came out, I was invited to the screening in Dallas, Texas. And I go down there, and I was actually coming from LA, so many of the actors were on the plane. David Oyelowo and Neo and
it was a
Parker. It was a weird thing because there was one flight out of LAX to Dallas, and everyone just happened to be on the flight. So everyone was going to the same place, and then we go to the screening, and I was sat, you know, between the real Tuskegee Airmen and the actors that played them. And a friend of mine had invited me because General Benjamin O. Davis, who was the commander of the Red Tails and the leader of the Tuskegee Airmen, was the patriarch and center of my family and the man who raised my dad. So she was like, "Doug, you have to come to this. I don't know, you know, why you weren't invited, but XYZ." So I get there, the Tuskegee Airmen are there, all this energy. And then when the movie starts, Terrence Howard comes out and he looks just like Ben. He talks like him. I was like, the casting was money. And then he's addressed as Colonel Bullard. And I look around the room and I'm like, wait, what about Colonel Davis? And when the rest of the movie continues, I realize other Tuskegee Airmen in the movie are seeing that their names aren't in the movie either. And I don't think anybody knew the names weren't going to be accurate, but then we get to the after party and what you had referenced about meeting Oprah Winfrey. They had set up a private meeting for me to connect with her in the back, and she said, "Douglas, you know, what did you think of the movie on behalf of, you know, the general's family?" And I said, "What about the names?" And she's like, "Doug, but you know, this is Hollywood, and these are amalgamations, and you know, the story's too big. All the names aren't real, but each character represents several different people." And all I can think about is, wait, what? We're all here for the premiere and the names aren't real? And she kept saying, "Doug, this is Hollywood. This is not a documentary." And throughout the night, I ask other people and everybody's like, "Doug, you know, this is Hollywood, you know, this is just a movie and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, okay. But I think It was that moment with Oprah Winfrey that actually inspired me and actually is a positive. You know, like sometimes you just need to hear the truth from someone who, you know, you look up to or admire, or, you know, Oprah was peak Oprah in 2011. She was just, you know, she was almost like you would never even find her because she was so famous at that time, white hot. So for her to tell me this, I went home and I talked to my dad, and my dad says, Doug, well, if you think changing the names in the movie's bad, why don't I tell you the real story about our experiences because we're Black? And then I was like, wait, what? Because you have to understand, I worked with Magic Johnson. I interned for Quincy Jones. My dad's a judge. Ben Davis grew up, you know, as the centerpiece of our family. I'm not looking at Black as something that was less than.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think this is the part about race in America that's so tricky. When you grow up as a kid, if you listen to Baldwin, he'll say, it wasn't till I looked into a mirror that I realized I was Black, you know, because you grow up like everyone else. You don't really know. And I had all these great opportunities. My family, we grew up on a lake. We had, you know, there was no like struggle in it. So when my dad hit me with that, it was just like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, Doug, well, that's today. But let me tell you about what happened in the story of Ben and his father who raised me. I call it the story of the invisible generals. And here I am. My mom is in the, you know, standing at the door in the kitchen. She had never heard the story. And my dad just sits down and starts telling me about how they have to live like they were invisible and the stories aren't right. But if you want to be successful as a person of color, you should keep your head down, be quiet. You know, the rules are different, twice as hard for half as much. You know, he's giving me that kind of like twice as hard for half as much talk. You know,
give you that real talk.
We all get it sometime. And if you don't get it from your family, your homie tells you, or your colleague or your teacher, somebody will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that's not fair. You know, and my dad's like, well, why don't you just focus on, you know, get another job. At the time I had a business called redcarpets.com. So I'm selling red carpets and step and repeats. And he was like, Doug, why don't you just, you know, why don't you focus on your company, you know, come up with more marketing, work on your supply chain. He's like, the first thing that if you want to end your career before it starts, talk about race.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, but Dad, you just told me it wasn't fair. And he's like, yeah. But it doesn't, life's not fair and it's a waste of time. But for me, I said, wait, everyone's going to come see this movie. The names are wrong. I want to find out the real story. And that started my kind of 10-year quest to gather information. And because I was a diversity officer at the same time, I was able to get tools and access, have people help me so I wasn't like a lone wolf, but actually get the support I needed to kind of understand how do you even uncover this, because this is not really what we do.
Right. And I think also it's important. I think truth is important. And I think truth is important on the delivery of it as well. And I say that because a lot of times truth is truth, but there's a time and a place, as they say, as you well know, as we all know, there's a time and a place for everything. Were you pissed after you watched the movie, and are you still pissed at the movie to this day?
I am not mad because my learning was the system. What I actually didn't know was I was looking at the movie like a fan. But then I had to change my thinking to understand, well, why were the names changed? Well, there was rewrites and he was trying to get the movie through and all that. But the gift of Red Tails to me was without Red Tails, there would be no Invisible Generals, because that was the biggest awareness for the story of the Tuskegee Airmen. And because it was done by George Lucas, and when George Lucas sold to Disney, it allowed the movie to live all over YouTube, all over the internet, all over reruns. So I needed the movie to be part of the story so I could tell people where to relate it from. But I think, I don't really have anything negative to say about the movie because I've kind of like processed my Kubler-Ross stages of grief. So I don't really need to do more about it. But I will tell you this, and this just happened yesterday, because my newest thing that I am not happy about is this new Apple TV series called Masters of the Air, which is a 9-part series. It's the 3rd part in the Band of Brothers series, produced by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. And the trailer recently came out, and it talks about this the 100th Bomber Brigade in World War II, and Ben was the 99th. The Tuskegee Airmen were the 99th in Italy, and this is the 100th over Europe and Germany, particularly. But in the trailer, they have a man who I think is Ben Davis, who's talking about the Tuskegee Airmen, and there's a lot of families that were contacted. You could go on YouTube and you could find the families, and they're like, oh, we're so happy Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg and blah, blah, blah. But all I'm saying is they never contacted us. And if the names are real, which is the movie's supposed to be historically accurate, but to me, something has to be said for Hollywood not contacting the families who are in the movie and surprising them, and then them not getting compensated. Because my biggest thing is we must compensate our heroes. If they are veterans and we know this and we understand what they went through, we have to have some level of empathy, creative freedom, professional courtesy, where the families are compensated if they are represented, and they are not just given an opportunity without giving any financial benefit of the doubt. So, I mean, that's my whole thing with this is you have all this money. Is it going to kill you to just make a donation to the estate, ask if they want something, things like that, which I think are important.
This is the NH Experience. Talk to y'all later.